Hello history fans and welcome back to the channel that helps you learn a little bit of history while you sleep. This video is a compilation of all my old reading to you videos because they've been around for 2 or 3 years and not all of you have, and I figured YouTube is liking longer videos, so if I uploaded a super duper long one it might do well and you guys might enjoy it because it will be really long and you can just leave it on while you fall asleep. There is new content coming, don't worry. I promise it's coming. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please like the video and subscribe, and let me know if there's any other reading to use, any other new video styles you want me to do. Yeah, I hope you enjoy. I'll see you soon. Should we have some bedtime fairy tales? We're going back to the old style, where I just show you the book, rather than my face. Hope that's okay. We'll start with The Wicked Witch, a fairy tale, apparently from London. There was once a devious old witch, and you know what her sort are like, always setting charms and jinxing things, and laying cunning traps to ensnare innocent children. Everywhere she prowled there was a toad on her trail, and a curse on her tongue, and you can be sure that nobody wanted to go near her. Now, in another part of the country there lived an impoverished family with a strapping daughter, and as soon as the girl was old enough, they sent her out into the world to seek employment. She wandered here and she wandered there, knocking at the door of every big house she came to, asking them to take her into service, but nobody wanted her, so she was forced to search even further afield, and before she knew it, her journey had taken her far from home and into the Wicked Witch's land. Soon, the girl began to notice some very strange goings-on. Many of the animals she passed were making noises that sounded like human speech, which she found very unnerving. Then the trees started talking too, and even the rocks, until finally a disembodied voice screeched out, "Help me, child! Oh, help me, do!" "Whoever is that?" the girl called fearfully. "I'm over here, in the field to your right," the voice shouted. Turning, the girl saw that an iron oven had been dumped in the middle of the field, and wafting out of it was the smell of burning. She approached it cautiously, and from inside the oven the voice called to her again. "Pity me, child, for once I was a fine and wholesome loaf of bread, but the Wicked Witch shut me in this oven 7 long years ago, and though I am baked through and through, she will not let me out." The girl had a kind heart, so she ran to open the oven door and set the loaf free, laying it gently upon the grass. The blackened loaf was gasping for air, but it thanked her profusely, and swore that, should the girl ever find herself in similar need, it would do all it could to reciprocate her kindness. The girl went on her way, and very soon she came to another field, where a cow, with dangerously swollen udders, stood bellowing piteously. As she approached it, the beast ceased its bellowing and called to her in human language, "Help me, child, oh help me do! Once I had 2 calves to drink from me, and a jolly farmer to milk me when the calves were satisfied. But 7 years ago the Wicked Witch drove them all away and cast a spell that made me swell and engorge unbearably. I am desperate for relief." At once the girl ran to the cow and set to work on her udders until a flood of milk flowed free. The cow vowed that she would never forget such kindness, and expressed the hope that she would one day be able to return it. And so the girl set off again, wondering at these strange events. Soon her thoughts were broken into by a curious creaking voice, which groaned, "Ah me, how I suffer! Help me, child, oh help me, do, if you have even a grain of sympathy in your heart." The girl looked over a dry stone wall to see a solitary, gnarled old apple tree, whose branches were laden with enormous misshapen fruits. Some had grown as large as pumpkins, whilst others were rotten and crawling with maggots and wasps. "Once I was the finest tree in the orchard," the apple tree sighed, "but 7 years ago the Wicked Witch killed all my companions and enchanted me, so that I endlessly bear hideously deformed fruit that no one will pick. If only you could free me from this burden." By now, the girl was well used to such curious appeals. At once, she hitched up her skirt and climbed over the wall, picking up a nearby stick. She reached up and beat it against the wretched tree's branches until all the malformed apples had tumbled to the ground. The grateful tree straightened itself and rustled in the breeze, swearing eternal friendship to the girl and earnestly hoping that it would have an opportunity to be equally good to her in return. And so the girl continued on her way, and the next place she arrived at was the house of the Wicked Witch. She took her courage into her hands and knocked boldly upon the front door. When the witch herself answered it, the girl dropped her best curtsy and asked the repulsive old hag if she had any need of a servant. "Indeed I do. Yes, I do," the witch cackled, peering down her warty nose at the girl and beckoning her inside with a crooked finger. "And I will pay you well, child, very well, so long as you keep my little house here tidy and clean." "Oh, I will, ma'am," the girl assured her, for she was so relieved that she had at last found a way to earn an honest wage that she scarcely cared who her new employer was. "Not so hasty," the witch snapped back at her. "I haven't finished talking to you yet. Before you start work, I must tell you the rule of this establishment. You must never, ever look up the chimney, for if you do, you'll regret it." The girl promised faithfully to do as she'd been told, and the witch set her to work without further ado. At first, everything went very well. But you know how it is when something is forbidden. It makes you long to do it, and it nags and nags at your mind until you can think of nothing else. That's exactly how it was for the girl, who had a burning desire to look up the chimney. Of course, she couldn't do anything about it while the witch was spying on her with those sunken, all-seeing eyes of hers. But one day, the old hag went out to attend to some secret business of her own, and as soon as she had gone, the girl took her chance. She went and stood in the chimney breast and poked her head inside to see what was there, and you'll never guess what she found. Not a spook or a booby trap, but a huge sack of gold coins, easily within her reach. Of course the girl couldn't resist reaching up and pulling it down, but at that very moment she heard the front door creaking open and the witch's outsized feet stomping into the house. "I'd better get out of here," the girl thought to herself, panicking. So she opened the window, jumped out, and ran for her life, taking the sack with her. She hadn't got very far when she heard the witch coming after her, but just then she came to the ancient apple tree that she had helped on her outward journey. As soon as the tree saw that the girl was fleeing the witch, it rustled its leaves and called to her, "Quickly, child, climb into my branches and hide." So the girl did, and not a moment too soon, for the witch was almost upon her. "Now then, you scabby old tree," the wicked witch hissed. "Have you seen a slip of a girl running off with my treasure?" The tree swayed and creaked and groaned, saying, "No, mother, not for 7 years." So the witch went on her way. Ha! But it was the wrong way. Meanwhile, the girl climbed down from the tree, bade it a fond farewell, and ran in the direction of her home. And it wasn't long before she met the cow she had helped before. The cow lowed a soft greeting and licked her affectionately. But then the gentle beast saw that the wicked witch had turned around and was fast approaching in the distance. "Quickly, child," she bellowed, "hide in that long grass where no one may see you." So the girl did, and not a moment too soon, for the witch was almost upon her. "Now then, you fat old cow," the witch hissed, "have you seen a slip of a girl who's stolen all my treasure?" The cow blinked and shook its head slowly, saying, "No, mother, not for 7 years." So the witch went on her way, and once again it was the wrong way. The girl came out of the grass, bade the cow a fond farewell, and ran yet further towards her home. And it wasn't long before she met the loaf of bread she had helped on her outward journey. The loaf greeted her cheerfully, and broke off some tasty crumbs from its belly, offering them to the girl to nibble. But then it spotted the wicked witch, who had changed direction again, and was galloping towards them in the distance. "Oh, loaf, whatever shall I do?" the poor girl cried. "Please can I hide in your oven?" "No," the loaf replied. "This time you must not hide, but run as fast as you can." So the girl ran off, and by the time the witch had reached the loaf of bread, she was 3 whole fields away and near the horizon. "Now then, you burnt and crumbly loaf," the witch shrieked. "I know you're hiding that thief of a girl in your oven. Move out of the way so I can open the door, pull her out and tear her to pieces." "Of course, mother," the loaf said politely, and stepped aside so the old witch could open the oven door and peer inside. "I don't see her," she hissed. "Where is she? Where is she?" "She must be cowering in the back, mother," the loaf answered. "If you go right in, you are sure to find her." So the wicked old witch hauled herself up with her claw-like hands, sat in the oven's doorway, and swung her crackly, bony knees up, then climbed right inside. At once the loaf slammed the door shut, then it lit the oven, so the witch was burned to a cinder. As for the girl, she ran all the way home, with the witch's treasure. By all accounts, her family was very glad to have her back, safe and sound. And with the first tale in this book is King Arthur and the Hideous Hag, and it comes from Cumbria. This is the lovely picture we get. King Arthur and the Hideous Hag. In the golden days, when the great forests still spread across the land, and travellers could pass freely between this world and the fairy realms, good King Arthur had his court at Carlisle. On New Year's Day, the king and all his knights were sitting at the round table, making merry, when suddenly there was a frenzied knocking at the door. The next moment, a pretty farm girl came rushing in with her hair all tangled and her dress torn, weeping most piteously. "Your Majesty," she cried, "I beg you to help me." King Arthur rose to his feet at once. "Fair lady," he answered her courteously, "I will be honoured to help you, but what troubles you?" "An evil ogre has moved into Hewin Castle, sir," wept the farm girl, wringing her hands. "You know, the old fortress that stands on the fells above Wadlin Tarn. I live on the opposite shore, and the ogre has been snatching girls and women from all the farms around there, and taking them up to his lair. Not one has ever come back. Please, your Majesty, I beg you to send one of your knights to kill him." A murmur rippled through the bold company at the round table. King Arthur said, "The first adventure of this new year, it must be mine. I will go to this evil ogre's castle, and I shall destroy him single-handed." The king put on his armour and took up Excalibur, the wondrous sword that was forged in fairyland, and gifted him by the Lady of the Lake. Then he mounted a white horse and rode with all speed over the snow-topped fells and through the dark forest, until he reached the looming fortress of Hewin Castle. The sky was dark with storm clouds. King Arthur jumped from his mount, drew Excalibur, and rapped upon the gates, calling, "Show yourself, ogre! I am Arthur, High King of all this land. I order you to cease your evil, or else come out and fight me to the death." An ugly roar of laughter answered him. Then the castle door burst open, and a huge, fearsome fellow came stooping through it. He was twice as tall as an ordinary man, with arms like great oak branches and a leering, slavering face. "Why are you bothering me, Arthur?" the ogre spat. "Who do you think you are, calling yourself High King, and ordering me about like a common servant? Yes, I can see that pathetic piece of metal you're clutching, and I've heard all about how mighty you're supposed to be. But let me tell you this, my power comes from witchcraft and devilry, and it's far more dangerous than Excalibur. Just in case you don't believe me, I'll give you a taste of it." Arthur brandished his sword and made ready to run at the ogre, but before he could move, the ogre raised his left hand high above his head, sending a dazzle of lightning across the winter sky. King Arthur gave a strangled cry. He swayed and stumbled back. Excalibur slipped from his hand, and his fingers clutched helplessly at the air. He began to shiver and tremble. His legs buckled, and he fell to the ground. "You viper!" he shouted. "What have you done to me?" His voice was hoarse and cracked. "Ah, it is only a mild enchantment to shrivel away your strength, your Majesty," the ogre mocked him. You'd better not feel sorry for yourself. I do far nastier things to the women I drag up here. Anyway, there's an easy enough way to break the spell. All you have to do is come back in exactly a year's time and tell me the answer to this very simple riddle. What does every woman long for? Then he turned his back on the king, stomped inside the fortress and slammed the door. The Knights of the Round Table were smitten with horror when their king finally managed to stagger back to Carlisle, bent and broken with sickness and despair. He took to his bed and lay there in a shameful torpor, day after day, and then month after month. None of his wise men or healers, not even wizard Merlin himself, could find a way to cure him. His illness cast a blight over the whole kingdom. That summer there was no rain and the crops failed. Robbers and wolves crept out from the great forest and brought terror to the land. And by Wadlin Tarn, the shadow cast by the cruel, misogynist ogre grew ever longer and darker. If only someone could solve the ogre's riddle! Every day Arthur called his entire court around his sickbed and urged them to try. Surely, between you all, you can work out what every woman longs for. Judging by my wife, I reckon it's gold and jewels, said one knight. No, mine just wants the most expensive dress, sighed another. Not material things, said a third knight. In my experience, every woman longs to be flattered. Rubbish, said a lady. What use is empty flattery? What I'd like is a really rich husband, and then for him to die quickly, and leave me all his fortune. Speak for yourself, said a haughty old dame. The only thing I long for is a bit of respect. And so the arguments ran on, but not one person in all the court could agree with another. The year turned, summer faded to autumn, which then hardened into a bitter winter. New Year grew closer, and with it the king's only chance to escape his bewitchment. Finally, he said, "Good knights, it seems to me that the only solution is to organise a quest to seek the answer to the riddle. So I command you all to ride forth into the great forest, each man alone, and let none of you return or rest until at least one man has found it." So the knights set out. Some rode eastwards through the winding paths of the forest, some rode westwards, and others went south or north. At that time the great forest was like no place you will find anywhere in England today, for its ancient trees and creepers spread to the horizon and even further, and it was dotted with mysterious wells, lonely hermitage, lost bowers and secret caves. As Sir Pellinore rode wonderingly through it, he caught the sound of distant music, a frenzied, eerie tune played on pipe and drum. He followed it to a clearing and glimpsed there a wall of ethereal dancers who seemed to fade away into a fluttery of snow. Then a hunched shape in a scarlet cloak stepped out from the undergrowth and called to him in a creaking voice. "Greetings, noble sir. Now why should our paths cross on such an ill-weathered night, eh? Can it be that I am fated to help you?" It was an old hag, a hideous, hunchback, filthy old woman. Her lipless mouth was drawn into a grimace, revealing blackened teeth. Her squinty, sunken eyes were riddled with bloody veins. Her nose was broken and hooked like an eagle's beak. Her jowls sagged and her skin was as warty as a toad's. "I know what you're after," she cackled. "It's the answer to a riddle, isn't it? Well, I could tell you it." "Then in God's name you must," cried Sir Pellinore. "Judging by your desperation," said the hag smugly, "this knowledge must be very valuable. Don't think I shall hand it over unless you give me something of equal worth in return." "I swear the king himself will give you a chest full of gold if you can answer the riddle correctly and free him from his enchantment," said Sir Pellinore eagerly. "Gold," scoffed the hideous hag. "What would I want with gold? It's no use to me." She rocked with laughter. No, young man, it's you I want. I want to marry you." At this, Sir Pellinore turned as white as the snow that fell softly all around him. "Impossible!" he cried. "Then be gone, you spineless wretch!" the hag screeched at him. and before he could say another word she disappeared into the blizzard. By and by the snow melted into rain, while thunder rumbled overhead. In another corner of the forest, Sir Kay rode boldly through the storm, driving his horse on and on until he came to a ruined tower. As he drew towards it to take shelter, the same scarlet-cloaked old hag suddenly stepped from the crumbling stones, her mouth twisting into a lascivious grin, and yellow tears dripping from her bloodshot eyes. "Well met, good sir," she hailed him. "I suppose you're on the royal quest too, eh? Looking for the answer to a riddle to save the kingdom and King Arthur's life? Well, I could easily solve it and turn you into hero of the quest, but only if you marry me first." Sir Kay stared at her in horror, shuddering at her twisted, warty face and misshapen body. "God forbid, you ugly old witch," he answered. "Get out of my way and let me pass." And he spurred his horse to gallop back into the storm. Far away from the ruined tower, the rain softened into a grey, swirling mist. Sir Gawain slipped off his horse and led the animal slowly through it, holding his hand before him like one who was blind. Soon he stumbled into the dark, spiky mass of a holly bush ablaze with scarlet berries. At once its branches parted and the hideous hag stepped out before him. "Good day to you, grandmother," said Sir Gawain courteously. "It's not a good day for me, but a tedious one," the hag croaked back at him. "I suppose you're like the rest of them, are you, seeking the answer to a foolish riddle?" Sir Gawain bowed his head. "You are right, grandmother," he answered. "And if by chance you are as wise as you are old, perhaps you can tell me, what does every woman long for?" "I know the answer," the hag replied in a cunning voice, "but I'm keeping it a secret until I find a knight willing to marry me. What do you say to that, eh?" Sir Gawain gazed at the hideous hag. He took in her warty skin, with grime etched into its lines and wrinkles. He breathed in her foul ditch-water stench. Finally he looked into her eyes and saw that, hideous as she was, he had no choice. "I will do what I must to save our kingdom from evil," he said, even though his heart was heavy with dread. "Come, good lady, come back to Carlisle with me at once and let us arrange our wedding." With a sweeping bow he offered the hag his hand and lifted her onto his horse. And we have a lovely picture of her here. When Sir Gawain had returned to Carlisle with the old hag and her promise to tell the answer to the evil riddle, King Arthur sent messengers out to find the other knights, and by Yuletide all had returned from the great forest. Although the king still languished in his sickbed, the rest of the court celebrated that season's feast more hopefully than any had dared to anticipate. 6 days later, another feast was held. This was to celebrate the ending of the old, ill-fated year, and to mark the marriage of Sir Gawain to the hideous hag. The dancing went on for many hours, with Carlisle lit by 1,000 lamps under the silvery midwinter moon. While King Arthur lay groaning in bed, Sir Gawain and the hag were married in the little chapel nearby. Then they retired early to their chamber, for Sir Gawain wished to get the ordeal with the hideous bride over with, and quickly. The little room had been hastily prepared and was in darkness. As Sir Gawain fumbled to light a candle, the hag said to him, "Why don't you come closer, husband?" Reluctantly, Sir Gawain took a single small step towards her. "For pity's sake," the hag said, "a big strong knight like you can't be afraid of me, surely. Go on, kiss me." Trembling in the darkness, Sir Gawain placed a kiss on her repulsive, twitching lips. But, wonders, they were sweeter than dew on a May morning. "Here," she whispered, "I'll light that candle for you." So she did, and by its light Sir Gawain saw that she was transformed. She had shed her ancient, wart-encrusted skin like a snake. Now she had become a beauteous, fair-skinned, golden-haired lady. "Whatever has happened?" Sir Gawain cried. "Husband," said the beauteous lady, "by marrying me you have saved me from a bewitchment no less terrible than the king's, which was placed on me by my jealous stepmother. I thank you for it from the bottom of my heart. But there is no time to waste. Let us hurry to King Arthur, so I can answer the riddle that imprisons him." So they hastened straight away to the king's chamber, when noble Arthur still lay feebly against his pillows. The knights of the Round Table and all their ladies came crowding in behind them. "Who is that lady?" they whispered to each other, and all marvelled when they heard she was the very same woman who less than an hour ago had been the hideous hag. King Arthur greeted her warmly. Then he said, "So, my lady, I believe you can tell me the secret I am desperate to know. What is it that every woman longs for?" And the beauteous lady curtsied and tossed back her golden hair and said, "Why, my lord, that is easy. Every woman simply wants her own way." At once every lady assembled in the king's chamber began to nod and laugh and clap her hands, for never had they heard truer words spoken. King Arthur cheered and applauded them. Then he called to his servants, "Help me from my bed. Take me to the ogre's castle, and let me free myself from this spell." It was a joyful company of knights who helped their weak-limbed king to mount his horse. They all set out in the snow and sunshine of New Year's Day, and made good speed to Herwin Castle. As soon as they arrived, they rapped their swords upon the grim gates. Out stumped the evil ogre, cursing and mocking the king. "So, you pathetic worm, are you going to try and solve my riddle? Let me warn you, only one answer is correct, and you only have one chance to try it." King Arthur's voice rang out into the snowbound stillness. "What does every woman long for? It is to get her own way." Scarcely had these words left his lips than the ogre roared as if struck by a mortal blow. There was a deafening clap of thunder, and then a bolt of lightning seared the winter sky and split the battlements of Herwin Castle clean in two. The dark walls came tumbling down around the ogre. He fell amongst the rubble as if he too were made only of clay and dust, and when some knights approached to search the ruins, they found no trace of him at all. As the castle and its evil master crumbled, strength and valour flowed back into Arthur's veins like melting snow rushed into streams with the winter's thaw. Brandishing Excalibur, he led Sir Gawain and all the other knights back to Carlisle, and there they lived for many more years in glory and in peace. I'm very sorry if you keep wobbling a little bit, but we are currently sat on my bed underneath the window, and you are leant on my little people pillow. Okay, so salvation and destruction. See, the conquering hero comes. At exactly this time, the very moment that Hesione, shackled to her rock, began to cast up prayers to Olympus for her delivery from Poseidon's sea dragon, Heracles and his band of followers arrived at the gates of Troy on their way back from his 9th labour, the acquisition of the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Autopilot. With his friends Telamon and Eucles by his side, Heracles was ushered into the royal presence. Honoured by the visit of the great heroes as the Trojan court was, Laomedon's mind was more on his plague-ridden and beleaguered city, depleted storerooms, than on the privilege of playing host to Heracles and his followers, however famous and admired they may be. It was a small army that travelled with him, but Laomedon knew that they would all expect to be fed. Heracles alone had the appetite of 100 men. "You're very welcome, Heracles. Do you plan to honour us with your company for long?" Heracles looked about the sombre court in some surprise. "Why the long faces? I had been told that Troy was the richest and happiest kingdom in the world." Laomedon, shifted on his throne. "You of all men should know that we are but playthings of the gods. What is a man but the hapless victim of their petty whims and vengeful jealousies? Apollo sends us contagion, and Poseidon a monster that chokes our sea channel." Heracles listened to Laomedon's self-pitying and largely fabricated version of the events leading up to Hesione's sacrifice. "Doesn't seem so difficult a problem to me," he said. "All you need is for someone to clear the seaway of that dragon and save your daughter. What did you say her name was?" "Hesione." "Yes, her. The plague will blow through soon enough, I dare say. They always do. Laomedon was dubious. That's all very well, but what about my daughter? Heracles bowed. The work of a moment. Laomedon, like everyone in the Greek world, had heard stories of the labours that Hercules had undertaken, the cleaning out of King Augeas's stables, the taming of the Cretan bull, the trapping of the great tusked boar of Mount Erymanthus, the killing of Nemean lion, and the eradication of the Lernaean hydra. If this lumbering ox of a man, with a lion skin for clothing and an oak tree for a club, had in truth performed such impossible feats and defeated such terrible creatures, then he might be able to free up the Hellespont and rescue Hesione. But there was always the question of payment. We are not a rich kingdom, Laomedon lied. Don't you worry about that, said Heracles. All I would ask for in return is your horses. My horses? The horses my father Zeus sent to your grandfather Tros. Ah, those horses. Laomedon wavered a hand as if to say, Is that all? My dear man, clear the channel of that dragon and restore my daughter to me, and you shall have them. Yes, and their silver bridles too. Less than an hour later, Heracles, blade between his teeth, had dived into the waters of the Hellespont and was breasting Poseidon's rising surge. Hesione, chained to her rock, the waters now coming up to her waist, watched in astonishment as a huge, muscled man, kicking hard, headed straight towards the narrowest part of the channel where the dragon lurked. Laomedon, Telamon, and Oicles, with the rest of Heracles' loyal company of Greeks behind them, watched from the shore. Telamon whispered to Oicles, Look at her! Did you ever see anyone more beautiful? While Hesione did present a most alluring sigh, Oicles had eyes only for the spectacle of his leader engaging a great sea dragon in the simple, direct, and violently confrontational manner for which he was celebrated. Heracles headed directly towards the creature, but far from showing fear, the dragon opened its mouth wide, and itself made for Heracles. Oicles thought he had the measure of his friend and commander, but what Heracles did next was entirely unexpected. Without breaking stroke, he swam straight into the monster's open mouth. The cheers from the shoreline were choked into a shocked silence as Heracles disappeared from sight. With a gulp and a snap of its colossal jaws, the creature rose up with a roar of triumph before diving down into the deeps. Hesione was saved, for a moment at least. But Heracles was lost. Heracles, the greatest, strongest, bravest, and noblest of heroes, was swallowed whole without so much as a struggle. Oicles and the others should have known better, of course. From inside the animal's stinking interior, Heracles immediately busied himself hacking hard with his blade. After what seemed an eternity, scales and chunks of flesh came bobbing to the surface. Telamon was the first to see them and pointed with a great shout as the sea began to boil with blood and torn flesh. When Heracles himself at last arose with a heaving gasp, sea water streaming from him, the assembled Greeks and Trojans gave a mighty hurrah. How could they have doubted the greatest of all heroes? A short while later, the shivering Hesione gratefully accepted Telamon's cloak and supporting arm as she and the cheering soldiers accompanied Heracles back to Laomedon. Some people are constitutionally unable to learn from their mistakes. When Heracles demanded the horses which had been agreed would constitute his payment, Laomedon sucked in through his teeth with a hiss, just as he had done with Apollo and Poseidon. "Oh, no, no, no," he said, shaking his head from side to side. "No, no, 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 no. The agreement was that you free up the Hellespont, not leave it all clogged with blubber, blood and bones. It'll take my men weeks to clean up the mess on the shoreline. Free up the Hellespont. Those were your very words and those terms. Can you deny it?" Laomedon jutted out his beard and gave a piercing glance around the room towards the assembled courtiers and members of his elite royal guard. His very words. "Free it up," he said. "As ever, your majesty is right. You see, so I can't possibly pay you. Grateful to have Hesione back, of course, but I'm sure the dragon would have done her no harm. Could have collected her from the rock ourselves in due course, and certainly without making a mess like that." With a roar of indignation, Heracles took up his club. The soldiers of Laomedon's guards immediately drew their swords and formed a defensive circle around their king. Telamon whispered urgently in Heracles' ear, "Leave it, my friend. We're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Besides, you have to be back in Tyrrhenus in time to start your 10th and last labour. If you're so much as a day late, you'll forfeit everything. 9 years of effort wasted. Come on, he's not worth it." Heracles lowered his club and spat at the semicircle of soldiers behind which Laomedon was cowering. "Your majesty hasn't seen the last of me," he growled. Executing a low bow, he turned and left. "I didn't mean that bow," he explained to Telamon and Oikles as they made their way back to the ship. "You didn't mean it. It was a sarcastic bow." "Ah," said Telamon, "I did wonder." "Dear me, how uncouth these Greeks are," said Laomedon, watching from the high walls of his city as Heracles' ship hoisted her sails and glided away. "No manners, no style, no address." Hesione looked on the departing ship with some regret. She had liked Heracles and was quite certain in her mind that no matter what her father might say, he truly had saved her life. His friend Telamon, too, was most polite and charming, nor was he unbecoming to look at. She looked down at her lap and sighed. Heracles' return. King Eurystheus of Mycenae and King Laomedon of Troy were cut from the same shabby cloth. Just as Laomedon had renegade... Is that the word? Is that what it says? Renegade? Yeah, I think so. Reneged. On his deal with Heracles, so now did Eurystheus. On his return from Troy, Heracles undertook his 10th, and as he thought final, labour, the transportation across the Mediterranean world of the monster Gerion's enormous herd of red cattle, only to be told by Eurystheus that 2 of the earlier labourers he had completed would not be counted, and that the 10 must now become 12. Thus it was that 3 full years passed before Heracles found himself free from bondage and able to turn his attention to the matter of King Laomedon's treachery, a grievance that had only grown and festered with time. He raised a volunteer army and sailed a flotilla of 18 Pentaconters, 50 oared vessels, across the Aegean. At the port of Ilium, he left Oikles in charge of the ships and reserve troops, and set out with Telamon and the larger part of his army to confront Laomedon. The wily Trojan king had been alerted by scouts to the arrival of the Greeks, and managed to outmaneuver Heracles, leaving the city of Troy and wheeling round behind to attack Oikles and the ships. By the time Heracles had discovered what was happening, Oikles and the reserves had all been killed, and Laomedon's forces were safely back behind the walls of Troy, preparing themselves for a long siege. In the end, Telamon broke through one of the gates and the Greeks poured in. They hacked their way mercilessly through the palace. Heracles, a little behind, came through the breach in the wall and heard his men cheering Telamon. "Surely he is the greatest warrior of them all. Hail Telamon, our general!" This was more than Heracles could bear. One of his red mists descended. Roaring in fury, he stormed through to find and kill his deputy. Telamon, at the head of his troops, was about to enter Laomedon's palace when he heard the commotion behind him. Knowing his friend and the terrifying effects of his jealous rages, he immediately set about gathering stones. He was in the act of building them up, one above the other, when a panting Heracles reached him, club raised. "Shh," said Telamon, "not now. I'm busy building an altar." An altar? Who to? Why, to you, of course, to Heracles, to commemorate your rescue of Hesione, your breaking of the siege of Troy, your mastery of men, monsters, and the mechanics of war. Oh. Heracles lowered his club. Well, that's good of you. Very good. Yes, very considerate, very proper. Least I could do. Arm in arm, the pair ascended the steps of the royal palace of Troy. The slaughter that followed was terrible. Laomedon, his wife, and all their sons were killed. That is to say, all their sons but the youngest, whose name was Podarches. His salvation came about in an unusual fashion. Heracles, his club and sword dripping with the blood of half the royal line of Troy, found himself in Hesione's bedchamber. The princess was kneeling on the floor. She spoke very calmly. "Take my life, so that I may join my father and my brothers." Heracles was so in the act of complying with her wishes when Telamon came into the room. "No, not Hesione." Heracles turned in some surprise. "Why not? You saved her life once. Why take it now? Besides, she is beautiful." Heracles understood. "Take her. She's yours to do with as you please." "If she will have me," said Telamon, "I will take her back home to Salamis to be my bride." "But you have a wife," said Heracles. Just then a sound from under the bed caught his ear. Come out," he called, stabbing there with his sword. A young boy emerged, covered in dust. He rose up to what full dignified height he could manage. "If I must die, then I do so willingly as a proud prince of Troy," he said, and then ruined the noble effect with a sneeze. "How many sons did the man have?" said Heracles, raising the sword once more. Hesione cried out and pulled at Telamon's arm. "Not Podarches. He's so young. Please, Lord Heracles, I beg you." Heracles was not to be persuaded. He may be young, but he is his father's son. A harmless boy can soon grow into a powerful enemy. "Let me buy his freedom," urged Hesione. "I have a veil of gold tissue that they say was once the property of Aphrodite herself. I offer it to you in return for my brother's life and freedom." Heracles was not impressed. "I can take it anyway. All of Troy is mine by right of conquest." "With respect, Lord, you will never find it. It is lodged in a secret hiding place." Telamon nudged Hercules. "Worth at least taking a look, don't you think?" Heracles grunted his assent, and Hesione went over to a tall, intricately carved cabinet that stood beside the bed. Her fingers released a hidden catch on the cabinet's rear, and a drawer slid out from the side. She drew from it a length of gold tissue and passed it to Heracles. Its value could not be estimated. Heracles examined the veil. It was marvellous how the material flowed around like water through his fingers. He put an enormous hand on the boy's shoulder. "Well, young Podarches, you are lucky that your sister loves you," he said, and tucked the veil into his belt. "And your sister is lucky that my friend Telamon seems to love her." Heracles and his forces left Troy a ruin. The ships of the Trojan navy were commandeered and loaded with all the treasure the Greeks could fit into the holds. Hesione, carried aboard by Telamon, looked back towards the city of her birth. Smoke rose up everywhere. The walls were breached in a dozen places. Troy, once so fine and strong, had been reduced to broken stones and smouldering ashes. Inside the city, the Trojans picked their way over the corpses and rubble. Their attention was drawn to the sight of a youth, barely more than a boy, standing outside the temple of the Palladium, which had at least been spared. Surely that was young Prince Podarches. "Citizens of Troy," the boy shouted, "do not despair." "How come he's still alive? I heard he hid under his sister's bed." "Princess Hesione bought his freedom." "He was bought? For the price of a golden veil?" "Bought?" "Yes," cried Podarches, "I was bought. You may say it was my sister, you may say it was the gods. There is a reason for all things. I, Podarches, of the blood of Tros and Ilus, tell you this. Troy will rise again. We will build her up so that she is finer, richer, stronger and greater than she ever was before, greater than any city in the world in all mortal history. Despite his youth and the dirt and dust that clung to him, the Trojans could not fail to be impressed by the strength and conviction that rang in his voice. I am not ashamed that my sister bought my freedom, he went on. It may be that time will prove me worth the expense. I prophesy that, in buying me, Hesione ransomed Troy itself, for I am Troy. As I grow to manhood, so Troy will grow to greatness. Ludicrous for one so young to be so self-confident, and yet no one could deny the lad had presence. The Trojans joined Podarches in kneeling down and casting up a prayer to the gods. So it was that, from that day on, Podarches led his people and directed the rebuilding of the ruined city. He did not mind that everyone now called him the one who was bought, which in the Trojan language was Priam. In time, that became his name. We will leave young Priam standing proud among the ashes and rubble of Troy, and travel over the sea to Greece. Things worth taking note are happening there. So it's called Tit Tot, and it's from Suffolk. There once was a foolish woman who had a foolish daughter, and which of them was worse I couldn't tell you. Anyway, one day the woman set to and picked 5 fine apple pies, and when they were done she put them on the pantry shelf to cool, then popped out to do her shopping. Her daughter was slathering at the mouth because of the delicious smell wafting through the air, and as soon as the mother had left, the girl sneaked into the pantry to steal a taste. It was so good that she couldn't help finishing off the whole pie, and then another, and yet another, until soon she'd eaten every single one of them. Just as she was licking the last crumbs off her fingers, her mother came home. When she saw what happened, she fell into a rage, and who can blame her? She slapped the daughter hard on both knees, and when the girl began to bawl, she whacked her backside with a broom handle, just for good measure. Then the woman went stomping out into the street, yelling at the top of her voice, "Oh Lord, Loverducks, what a glutton I've got for a daughter! That's 5 whole pies the girl's eaten, all in a single day." Eventually she calmed down a bit, but when she turned around to go back indoors, guess what she found behind her? A big black horse with bells and golden ornaments on its bridle, and on its back sat the king. Of course, the woman was terribly flustered. She smoothed her hair and dropped a curtsy and muttered a humble apology for not seeing his majesty. But the king waved away her apologies and said, "Good woman, I heard you saying something about your daughter just now, which sounded very interesting, but I couldn't quite catch the words. Would you kindly repeat it?" Well, there was no way that woman was going to tell the king the disgusting truth about her daughter's greed, so she thought quickly and answered, "Yes, I was just saying, your majesty, what a great spinner I have for a daughter. She's spun 5 skeins of flax in a single day." "Good heavens above, 5 skeins in one day," marvelled the king. "I've never heard of such skill and diligence in all my life. She sounds like a girl in a million. Bring her out, woman. Let me have a look at her." So the woman went to fetch her daughter, who came out giggling and blushing quite prettily. The king looked her up and down for a few moments, and then scratched his bristly beard. "I've been searching for a suitable wife for some time," he said, "and it seems to me that this girl of yours would be just perfect for me. She seems innocent, she's a good looker, and, best of all, she's clever with her hands." The woman's mouth dropped open in astonishment. "I think I'll marry her," said the king shortly. "In fact, there's nothing to be gained by wasting time, so I'll take her with me now and hold the wedding tomorrow, and after that she can live in the royal palace with me and be my queen." The woman and her daughter both gasped. "But there's one condition attached to the deal," the king went on. "For 11 months of the year she can laze about and live a life of unadulterated luxury, and I won't ask anything of her. However, she has to spend the 12th month spinning 5 skins of flax every single day, just like you said. And if she can't or won't, I'll have her executed." Now, maybe it wasn't the woman's foolishness, or just her optimistic nature, but she didn't worry at all about how her daughter was going to fulfill this condition. All she could think of was how fine it would be to see her child prancing about in fine dresses and priceless jewels, and for herself to be Queen Mother. The girl got no say in the matter, but as she couldn't see further than her own nose, she was more than happy with the arrangement anyway. So the girl packed her bags and went to the palace with the king without delay, and the next day he threw a really grand feast for the wedding. The guests were nobles and warriors and emperors from who knows where, and the tables spilled over with rich food and wine. Then the girl settled down into her new life, and before long she'd almost forgotten that she had been born a peasant, because she took to the royal lifestyle so easily. And so the months rolled by, and she grew plumper and prettier by the day. Then, all of a sudden, the first 11 months were up. "Come with me, my dear," the king said to her the next morning, and he led her up the winding staircase of a tall tower to a cold, round room that she'd never seen before. In it there was nothing but a single high window, a wooden spinning wheel, a wooden stool, and a big rush basket overflowing with raw flax. "Sit yourself down there," the king said. And it wasn't said at all unkindly, for he had absolute faith in his wife after he'd heard her mother's boasts. "Now get on with your spinning, and make sure you've got 5 skeins finished by the time it gets dark. Then you can come down into the hall for a big meal and a bit of dancing." The girl sat down and looked up dolefully at the king. "Supposing I can't get it finished in time?" she asked him. "Not get it finished in time?" he answered, and his face clouded. "Ha! I'll have to send the executioner along to you with his axe and tell him to chop off your head." And with that he went out of the room and locked the door tightly behind him. Now, to tell you the truth, not only was the girl incapable of working as fast as the king had been led to believe, but she hardly knew how to spin at all. She was all fingers and thumbs, messes and tangles, and she'd never completed so much as 1 single skein of yarn in all her life. Knowing the game was up, she burst into tears. Then, all of a sudden, she heard a soft scuttling noise, like some kind of vermin running around the room. She looked up, expecting to see either a mouse or even worse, a rat. Instead she found herself staring straight at a dark imp. He was no higher than her knee, with a twisted, ancient face, and a stringy tail dragging on the floor behind him. And this is what he looks like. Are you going to focus? I don't know. I can't see. "What's the matter?" asked the imp in a husky voice. "Why are you crying?" He was an uncanny-looking thing, but he didn't seem set on hurting her. Besides, she was so distressed and lonesome that she thought any kind of company would be better than none. So she wiped her eyes and told him all her troubles, starting with her mother's rage on the day when she'd gobbled up all the pies, up until that very morning when the king, who had treated her so kindly until then, had set her the task and made his grim threat about what would happen if she couldn't fulfill it. The imp flicked his stringy tail around this way and that, and blinked at her. Then he said, "There's no need to worry any more, lassie. You just sit back on the stool and have a nap, and don't open your eyes until I say so. By that time, all the spinning will be done." The girl was overjoyed at the imp's offer, but she remembered her mother constantly scolding her greed and saying how nothing in life was ever free. So she said to the imp, "That's very kind of you, mister. Thank you very much. But please could you tell me what you'll charge for the job?" "I might not charge you anything at all," he answered, "if you can guess what my name is." "Is that really so?" she said, surprised. "It is," said the imp, "and each day that I come in to do your spinning, I'll give you 3 guesses. That's 3 each day for the 30 days of this month, making 90 guesses altogether. But if you haven't found the right answer by the month's end, you'll be mine." 90 whole chances was a lot, she thought to herself. Surely there couldn't be more names than that in the whole world. So she agreed to the imp's bargain, settled herself comfortably on the stool, and closed her eyes as the imp set to work. She was so tired from weeping, and the noise of the spinning wheel was so soothing, that soon she fell fast asleep. She didn't wake until the sun was setting behind the high turret window, and sure enough, the imp had finished all the spinning, and there were 5 neat skeins of fine linen yarn piled up in the basket. "You've done it all, like you said you would," she cried. "Of course I have," said the imp. "I'm a gentleman, and always true to my word. Now make a guess at my name, and then I'll be off. What do you think it is?" She said. "Is it John?" "It's not," he replied. "Then is it William?" "No," he said. "Is it Ned?" "Wrong again," cried the imp, and he twirled his tail and spun around so fast that he was like a dazzling whirlwind of dark dust, and then he completely vanished. "Never mind," thought the girl to herself. "I've still got another 87 chances." To tell the truth, she wasn't at all worried that the imp would snatch her away. She was just so pleased that he'd got the spinning done for her. And then the king came in and swept her into his arms, because he was so pleased with all the hard work he thought she'd done. The rest of the evening passed in such a haze of joy that she almost forgot her worries. The next day dawned, and exactly the same thing happened. The king took her up to the lonely turret and locked her inside with the spinning wheel, the stool, and the basket of raw flax. Then the imp appeared out of thin air, told her to go to sleep, and did all the spinning for her. When she awoke, she had 3 more tries at guessing his name, but still couldn't get it right. No matter, there was still another 28 days left, and she was sure to find the answer. But the next day ended in the same way, and the one after that too, and so on, until at last there was only 1 day to go before the end of the month, when the triumphant imp would claim her as his own. On the evening before that ominous day, on account of all the work he thought she'd done, the king was in an especially good mood with her. He sat her on his knee and fed her choice tidbits, and told her all sort of palace secrets that he'd never shared with her before. Then, all of a sudden, he began to laugh, until he was shaking so much that she almost tumbled off. "Whatever's the matter?" she asked him. "I was just remembering a funny thing I saw today," the king replied. "I was out with all my knights, hunting in the forest, when my horse strayed off the path and I heard a strange cackling noise. I found I'd come to the edge of an old chalk pit, and when I looked into it, there was the weirdest little creature I've ever seen. It was neither man nor beast, but dark and scuttling like a spider, only with 2 legs instead of 8, and a horrible scraggy tail, like a piece of dirty string, and it was dancing around and singing at the top of its voice." When she heard this, the girl sat up very straight. "What was it singing about?" she gasped. The king burst out laughing again, but when he'd recovered himself, he said,
It was all just silly nonsense, my dear. The words went something like this, I think. Nimmy, nimmy, not. My name's Tom Tit Tot. The girl bit her tongue and didn't say another word to the king, but you can be sure she was very pleased about what she'd heard. The next morning, for her last day of spinning for the year, the king took her into the turret as usual, and soon the imp appeared, sent her to sleep and got on with his work. When she opened her eyes, the usual pile of 5 linen skeins were in the basket, and the imp was leering at her with a very evil glint in his eye. There, he said, that's done for this year. Now I'll have to let you have your 3 final guesses, because I promised to do so. But as soon as you get the last one wrong, he gave a lascivious laugh. Oh yes, you'll be mine. So go on then, what's my name? She flustered as usual. Is it Gideon? Wrong, the creature mocked her. Then could it be Emmanuel? No, he cried. Now, lassie, have your very last go. And he stretched out his mean little hands, all covered in scars and dirt and warts, and snatched at her skirts. The girl took her time. She swallowed and said the words silently to herself, because she didn't dare risk not getting them right the first time. Then she took a deep breath, pointed her finger at the imp and whispered very slowly, Nimmy, nimmy, not. Your name's Tom Tit Tot. As the last words left her lips, the imp gave a shriek so piercing that it must have woken every dead person in the graveyard behind the royal palace. Then he vanished into thin air, and the girl never saw him again. And that's the end of tonight's story.